The gunshot cracked through the quiet bank like thunder. People screamed. Chairs scraped violently across the floor. A woman dropped her handbag and fell to her knees. "Everyone down!" a masked man roared. 3 men rushed through the entrance, their faces hidden behind black masks. One of them fired another warning shot into the ceiling. Plaster rained down. "Face the floor! Nobody look at us!" Another robber shouted. Customers collapsed to the ground in terror. A man began praying loudly. Someone was crying near the teller counter. But one woman stayed strangely calm. Juliet sat on the cold marble floor with the others, her back against a desk. Her breathing was steady while chaos exploded around her. She slowly lifted her eyes. 3 robbers, one tall and confident, clearly the leader, one bulky with a shaky grip on his gun, and one restless man pacing like a trapped animal. Juliet lowered her gaze again. 3 men, 2 guns pointed at customers, one watching the entrance. Her mind worked quietly while everyone else panicked. "Manager!" the tall robber barked. "Where is the manager?" A trembling man in a suit slowly stood up. I'm the manager." "Good," the robber said coldly. "You're opening the vault." The bulky robber shoved his gun toward the crowd. "If anyone moves," he growled, "I swear somebody dies today." A young mother sobbed quietly as she pulled her child close. Juliet's eyes shifted again. She studied the robbers carefully. The leader was calm, professional. The bulky one was nervous. But the restless one, he was dangerous. He kept waving his gun around, shouting at people for the smallest movement. "Stop looking at me!" he yelled at an old man. The old man immediately pressed his face harder into the floor. Juliet felt a chill run down her spine. Then the restless robber spoke again, and something inside her mind clicked. That voice. Her eyes lifted slowly. No. Her heart skipped. She knew that voice. Months earlier, she had spent days reviewing a criminal file involving armed robbery suspects. She remembered the recordings, the testimony, the interviews. One of the suspects had escaped arrest, and his voice sounded exactly like that man. Juliet swallowed slowly. It can't be. But when the robber stepped closer and shouted again, the sound confirmed it. Her pulse quickened. It's him. If he recognized her, she was in serious danger. Meanwhile, the leader forced the manager toward the vault. "Walk!" he ordered. I'm walking," the manager stammered. The vault door buzzed loudly as it unlocked. The bulky robber laughed nervously. "Oh, yeah, this is going to be a good day." Juliet watched everything quietly. Her mind was racing now. If this really was the man she thought it was, then this robbery was already doomed. Because criminals who had escaped arrest before were always the most desperate. Suddenly, the restless robber turned toward the customers again. His eyes scanned the room. Then they stopped. On her. Juliet quickly lowered her head, but he had already noticed. He walked closer. His boots stopped just inches from her. "Hey." Juliet didn't move. "I said hey," he snapped. Slowly she looked up. Their eyes met through the holes in his mask. "Why are you staring?" he asked. I wasn't," Juliet replied softly. "Don't lie to me." "I'm just scared," she said quietly. The robber studied her face carefully. Everyone else in the room looked terrified. But she wasn't shaking. That made him uneasy. "You look too calm," he muttered. Juliet lowered her voice. "I'm trying not to panic." For a moment, he just stared at her. Then he scoffed. "Yeah, you better not." He turned away and walked back toward the others. Juliet released a silent breath, but the danger had already started. Across the room, the bulky robber whispered to the leader. "Something feels off about that lady." The leader glanced briefly at Juliet. Then he shrugged. "She's just scared like everyone else." But Juliet knew something they didn't. She knew exactly who one of them was, and if she could stall them long enough, someone might come. Minutes passed. The vault door finally opened. Stacks of cash filled the shelves. The bulky robber grinned wildly. "Jackpot!" "Start loading the bags," the leader ordered. Juliet's eyes slowly moved toward the desk beside her. Her fingers brushed against the edge. There was a small metal button hidden underneath. The silent alarm, but it was too far. She couldn't reach it without moving. The restless robber suddenly spun around again. "Hey!" Everyone froze. "I said nobody moves!" Juliet lowered her head again. The tension in the room was tightening, and the robbery was only getting started. Her mind whispered one thought over and over. Someone has to stop this. And somehow, that someone might have to be her. The robber's boots echoed across the bank floor as he paced back and forth like a restless animal. Juliet kept her head low, her eyes fixed on the marble tiles beneath her. Around her, people were whispering prayers, sobbing quietly, or holding their breath in fear. "Move faster!" the leader barked from inside the vault. "I'm moving!" the bulky robber replied while stuffing bundles of cash into a black bag. "Relax, man. We don't have all day." The manager's voice trembled. "Please, just take the money and leave." The leader laughed coldly. "Oh, we will." Juliet listened carefully to every word. Her heart was beating faster now, but her mind remained sharp. She knew something the others didn't. These men were not organized, and disorganized robbers were dangerous. Across the floor, a young man whispered to the woman beside him. "I think they're going to kill us," he murmured. "Don't say that," the woman whispered back, her voice breaking. Juliet glanced sideways. Fear was spreading through the room like wildfire. She knew if panic erupted, someone could get shot. The restless robber suddenly pointed his gun toward the customers again. "Quiet!" he snapped. Everyone froze instantly. Then his eyes drifted back toward Juliet. He frowned slightly. She was still calm, too calm. He walked toward her again. Each step made the tension thicker. He stopped right in front of her. "You again," he said slowly. Juliet looked up carefully. "Yes?" "You're not crying." Her voice was steady. "I'm trying to stay calm." He leaned closer. "Why?" Juliet shrugged faintly. "I don't want to make things worse." The robber stared at her face. Something about her confidence bothered him. People usually begged at this point. They screamed, they cried. But this woman spoke like she was having a normal conversation. "You think you're brave?" he asked quietly. "No," Juliet said. "I'm just trying to survive like everyone else." For a moment he seemed unsure what to say. Then he scoffed again and stepped away. But now his suspicion was growing. Inside the vault, the bulky robber shouted excitedly, "Boss, we got enough here to disappear for years." The leader stepped out holding another bag. "Good. 2 more minutes and we're gone." Juliet's heart skipped. 2 minutes. That wasn't enough time for anything. She glanced again at the desk beside her. The silent alarm button was just inches away. But the restless robber was still watching the room. She needed a distraction. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed through the bank. Everyone jumped. One of the bags of money had slipped from the bulky robber's hands. "Watch it," the leader snapped. "Relax," the bulky robber said nervously while picking it up. "Just dropped it." Juliet saw her chance. She slowly shifted her body slightly, just a few inches. The restless robber's head snapped toward her immediately. "Hey!" Juliet froze. "What did I say about moving?" he shouted. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "My leg is cramping." "Keep it still." "I will." He stared at her again for several seconds. Then he turned his attention back toward the others. Juliet exhaled slowly. Too risky. She needed something else. Across from her, a middle-aged man sat shaking uncontrollably. His hand rested against the side of the desk, right above the silent alarm. Juliet whispered softly, "Sir." The man didn't respond. He was too scared. "Sir," she whispered again. He slowly turned his head toward her. His eyes were wide with terror. "What?" he whispered. "Under the desk," Juliet said quietly. "What?" "The button." His eyes flickered downward, then back to her. His face went pale. "No," he whispered. "They'll see me." "They won't," she said. "They will." Juliet leaned slightly closer. "You have to try. I can't. You can. The man's breathing became faster. I'll die, he whispered. Juliet looked directly into his eyes. If we do nothing, we might all die. The man swallowed hard. Across the room, the leader zipped another bag. One more, he shouted. The bulky robber hurried back to the vault. The restless robber was still pacing, but his back was turned. Juliet whispered again. Now. The man's hand trembled violently. Slowly. Very slowly. His fingers slid under the desk. Juliet's heart pounded in her chest. The robber suddenly turned around. Hey! The man froze instantly. Juliet spoke quickly. Please, can I have some water? The robber looked irritated. What? I feel dizzy, she said weakly. Too bad. Please. He rolled his eyes. You're not dying. I might faint. He sighed angrily and looked toward the counter. Hey, is there water back there? He shouted. The teller nodded nervously. Yes. Bring it. While the robber turned his attention toward the counter, the man under the desk pressed the button. A silent signal shot through the bank's security system. Outside the building, an alarm quietly reached the nearest police station. Inside the bank, no one heard it, but Juliet felt the shift immediately. Now the clock had started. The robber handed her a bottle of water. Drink. Thank you, she said softly. He squinted at her again. You're strange. Juliet gave a small, nervous smile. I've been told that before. He shook his head and walked away again. But something deep inside him was starting to feel wrong. Very wrong. And outside the bank, in the distance, faint sirens were beginning to wake up. Juliet kept the water bottle in her hands, even though she wasn't thirsty. Her ears were straining for one thing: sirens. At first, there was nothing but the sound of cash being shoved into bags and the nervous breathing of terrified customers. The leader stepped out of the vault again. That's it, he said sharply. We're done. The bulky robber zipped the last bag and lifted it with a grin. Man, we're rich. Save the celebration for later, the leader snapped. Let's move. The restless robber was still pacing the room, scanning every face. Something inside him felt wrong. He couldn't explain it. But the woman kept bothering him. Juliet. He turned suddenly. His eyes locked onto her again. She was watching him. Calm, observant, like she was studying him. A cold feeling crawled up his spine. He walked toward her again slowly. Juliet saw him coming. Stay calm. His boots stopped right in front of her. You again, he muttered. Juliet looked up quietly. Yes? His voice dropped lower. Why do you keep looking at me? I'm not, she replied softly. Don't lie. I'm just scared. He leaned closer. No. Scared people cry. Juliet stayed silent. Then he said something that made the air freeze. Do I know you? The question hung in the room like a ticking bomb. Juliet's heart pounded hard against her ribs, but her face stayed steady. I don't think so, she answered. He studied her carefully. Then suddenly his eyes widened slightly. Something was clicking inside his head. Wait, he murmured. Juliet felt the danger rising. The leader shouted from across the room. Let's go! But the restless robber didn't move. He kept staring at Juliet. Have I seen you before? He asked again. Juliet shook her head slowly. No, but the man's breathing was changing now. Court, he whispered suddenly. Juliet's stomach tightened. You were in court, he said. The room went silent. The bulky robber turned. What are you talking about? The restless robber pointed his gun directly at Juliet. This woman, he said slowly. I've seen her before. Gasps rippled through the room. Juliet remained seated. The leader stepped closer. What do you mean? I saw her during my case, the robber said. His voice was shaking with anger now. She was there when they were trying to lock me up. The leader looked sharply at Juliet. Is that true? Juliet slowly stood up. Every customer watched in horror. Yes, she said calmly. The robbers froze. You're a cop? the bulky robber asked. No, the restless robber shouted angrily. She's lying. She works in the legal system. The leader's voice became cold. What exactly do you do? Juliet looked directly at him. I'm a lawyer. The words dropped like a stone into the room. The bulky robber cursed. You've got to be kidding me. The restless robber's finger tightened on the trigger. She's been watching us this whole time. The leader suddenly grabbed Juliet's arm and shoved her forward. You think you're smart? He growled. Juliet looked straight into his eyes. I think you're running out of time. What? And then they heard it. Faint at first, then louder. Sirens. Police sirens. Every robber froze. The bulky robber panicked. Oh no! No. The leader spun toward the windows. How? The restless robber screamed at Juliet. You did this! Juliet didn't deny it. I warned you, she said quietly. The leader grabbed his gun tighter. We're leaving. Now. But it was already too late. Outside the bank, police cars screeched to a stop. Commands blasted through loudspeakers. Drop your weapons! Come out with your hands up! The bulky robber started shaking violently. We're surrounded! The restless robber pointed his gun back at Juliet. I'm taking her with us! You're not taking anyone, the leader snapped. But before they could move, the front doors exploded open. Armed officers rushed inside. Police! Drop the weapons! Chaos erupted. The bulky robber threw his gun down instantly. Don't shoot! The restless robber hesitated. 1 second too long. Officers tackled him to the ground. The leader tried to run toward the back door, but 3 officers slammed him against the wall and cuffed him. Within seconds, it was over. The customers burst into tears of relief. Some people hugged each other, others simply collapsed onto the floor. Juliet stood quietly while an officer approached her. Ma'am, are you okay? She nodded. Yes. You were very brave. Juliet gave a small, tired smile. I just didn't want anyone to get hurt. The officer looked around at the captured robbers. Well, thanks to you, nobody did. Months later. The courtroom was silent. The 3 robbers sat at the defendant's table wearing prison uniforms. Their confidence was gone. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Then the courtroom doors opened again. Footsteps echoed across the floor. Juliet walked toward the prosecutor's desk. The restless robber's eyes widened when he saw her. You, he whispered. Juliet placed her files on the table calmly. Then she looked directly at him. You should have chosen a different bank, she said quietly. The judge's gavel struck. Court is now in session. Justice had finally arrived, and that robbery had gone terribly wrong because of one customer. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling us what you would have done in that situation.